You've been categorized as Mr. Intangible. I've seen that. Michael Peca, Mr. Intangible. Why did you get that kind of moniker?
If I think about it, I think it's when you look at players that have intangible qualities. I think there's a level of intelligence to the hockey game. It's understanding the game. It's appreciating the little things in the game. And if you have a very well-rounded, very disciplined game, I think it's easy to get that attachment intangible because you're strong defensively, you're strong on face-offs, you block shots, you finish your checks. I mean, there are little things you teach kids at a young age, and you hope they adapt and grow that. Not everything sticks with everybody, so ever since I can remember being 12, 13 years old, I want to be on the ice in every key situation. I remember that, and so I really tried to mold my game. So if it was an offensive situation, the coach wanted me out there. If it was a defensive situation, the coach wanted me out there, regardless of if we were power play, penalty kill, didn't matter. So. I think that's maybe part of the reason that happened.
Well, the 2 Selke trophies is terrific, and a plus 66 over your lifetime. That's an amazing number. Did that strike you?
It does in a sense because there was a stretch of time there for about a decade where, I had great line mates who committed themselves defensively as well, great goaltenders, Dominik Hasek being one of them. Yeah, but it's surprising in a sense because you're going against the Forsbergs, the Lemieux, the Jagers, the Matt Sundins, the Mike Modanos, and those are guys that scored an awful lot of points in the National Hockey League. So to be on the positive side of the plus-minus ledger, I think was a great accomplishment, not just for me, but the guys that I played with.
I was sitting in the odd, and we were actually passing out the Stanley Cup. In the ceremonies, everybody hung around because nobody expected they'd ever see a Stanley Cup in Buffalo, and here's one. And then all of a sudden, Lindy Ruff comes out and starts going bananas. I mean, unbelievably pounding the board, bananas. I've never asked, what was going on in the locker room after the game is over, you leave? Was there discussion about that?
Well, to start at the end of that, too, Lindy actually followed me out to the bench. I was actually the first one that was out there yelling at Gary Bettman, and Lindy was right behind me. I think stuck around a little bit. But what happened was, being on the bench at the time when the goal was scored, the NHL, who controls the Zamboni doors in the Stanley Cup final, the arena facility staff no longer has that control because they want to capture the moment when the goal scored and the Stanley Cup and all that. So we just thought it was over. But when we got inside and started looking at the replay, we realized that a goal was scored that had been disallowed not just throughout the playoffs but the entire second half of the regular season. So, I think emotions were as high as they were going to be on a negative level because we just lost and there's a tremendous amount of disappointment. And I think that fueled the need to get a question answered. And so we stormed out there. There wasn't a goal. His foot was in the crease, and this and that and the other thing. And probably not the way you should speak to a commissioner of a league when you're 5 feet away from him. But all the same, it happened. And so I think we lived a very disappointing moment at the time. I think everybody agreed that it was a bad rule, but a rule all the same that in that same playoff season, goals were being disallowed left and right because a foot was in the crease. Even when a guy was one-on-one with the goalie, it happened. So it was just an overall disappointing moment.
So what'd you say to Bettman?
Can't say. But the funny thing was a week later, I'd just run into him face-to-face at the NHL Awards at the Air Canada Centre. And he'd come up to me and said, hey, Michael, you and I need to have a talk. And, I was still pretty upset when I saw him. I said, well, unless it's about you apologizing for the way things played out in Buffalo, I said, we have nothing to say to each other. And that was the end of it.
Ted Nolan was with the Sabres for a couple of years and then disappeared literally from hockey. Why?
I'm not sure. That's one of those things that's been speculated on for a long time. I think in a nutshell, it was a coach and a general manager and Ted Nolan and John Muckler that just didn't work well. And anytime you're a coach and you go over your general manager's head, whether it's the president or the ownership group, other GMs are going to find out about that. And I think the thing that hurt Ted was GMs were just afraid to hire a guy that didn't honor the protocol and the chain of command. And I think that's what kept him out of the game for a long time. There are just people that have been around the game of hockey that just make moments special. And Rick's one of those guys. I mean, for me, when I was growing up, hockey to me meant Bob Cole and Harry Neal and Hockey Night in Canada. And every time I saw the Leafs, I just thought of those guys. And as I was growing up, I mentioned listening to Ted Darling on the radio. But Rick Jeanneret's been that for the Buffalo Sabres as well. He's just got a very loving and unique way of calling games, and he's a special guy. He has so much passion for what he does, and it shows. But Dominik Hasek was just, the way I kind of evaluate his ability and what he meant to the game is he revolutionized the position. I think as any player in any sport, if you can revolutionize a particular position, then you're excellent and you're special. And Dominik Hasek did that. Nobody played the game the way he did. I grew up, it was Steve Yzerman. He was just always the type of guy that I loved to watch play, and just seemed to have the same level of humility that I had as a young boy, and really tried to emulate the way he played.
You teamed with Steve at the Olympics in '02. Was that your highlight?
It was. It was a very cool moment in early September. We were in Calgary, and we had our orientation camp with Team Canada. And Steve and I sat next together in the locker room, and I'd met him briefly before that. But we started talking. I told him how I was always a big fan of his when I was a kid. Not to make him feel old, but then Pat Quinn came in. And he says, "All right, you guys are going to play together for the scrimmage today. Michael, you're in the center, and Steve, you're on the left wing." And I remember saying, "Hey, whoa!" I said, "I'm not going to center, Steve Yzerman." I said, "I'll go on the wing. He'll be the centerman." And in such a classic moment, Steve said, "Don't worry, when the tournament comes around, I'll be playing with Mario, so don't worry about it." Well, so it kind of made me feel, all right, that's okay, then you go on the wing. That's how you feel. The gold medal is a moment that every 2 years when there's an Olympic event, whether it's Summer or Winter Olympics, and you can think back and I reminisce with my kids that I'm an Olympic gold medalist, and there's something very special about that. But from the age of 9, 10 years old, all I ever wanted to do was hoist a Stanley Cup. So the thing that hurts most is 99 with Buffalo hurt, but not nearly as much as Edmonton in 2005 because 2006 because we were in a Game 7 and we could have won the Stanley Cup. Buffalo, we could have extended it another game, but in Edmonton we had it in that game. We had a chance to win a Stanley Cup, and rarely does a day or two go by that I don't think of that game still. It's still doesn't eat at me anymore, but I think about it a lot and think what could have been, how things could have been different.
Michael, Peca in the Sabres orbit is wonderful because you were so popular here. Was it hard during 2000, 2001 when you just couldn't come to agreement with the Regis organization?
It was very painful because things could have been handled so much more differently, and not just on the management side, but on my side as well. And I had a high-profile player agent that had a game plan, and I was on board with that game plan. But I think, from what I've been told is, ownership felt that they had all the control as per the CBA regulations, and they knew that my wife was there. We had our roots, deep into the ground in Buffalo. That they were just going to make me sit and wait. And a line I always use with my kids is, "I'm not the guy to play chicken with because I'll never back down." Mm-hmm. So it got to a point where it was a matter of principle, and it wasn't the money, and it wasn't anything else but principle. And I just, once I found that out, I just felt like I couldn't, in good conscience, walk back in that locker room and play hard for that ownership group.
Did you get any tips from Rob Ray?
I've never taken advice from Rob Ray. He's one guy that I've always considered. I don't think there's anything Rob can lend, and no, I'm just kidding. Rob was a guy who you can tell cared. I mean, he was a guy that cared about the team, the organization, the community, and I'm very good friends with Rob still today, and that still comes out of him. You can tell the way he does the broadcast, and it's going to be exciting to hear him up with Rick Jeanneret this year because I think he's gotten so comfortable behind the microphone, and his perspective is so deep that he's a lot of fun to listen to. But Rob is just the kind of guy I think that showed me that it's okay to be hard on your teammates if it's done the right way, and he was like that. He was a guy in the locker room when I was a young captain, wasn't very vocal. He was very supportive in that respect. He'd hold guys accountable, but he'd do it in the right way, and I learned a lot from that.
You're terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.